Live from our studio audience, it's 5 More Minutes, Mom, with your hosts, Brielle and Guerlain, on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of 5 More Minutes Mom with your host Brielle.
And Guerlain.
One of these days I'll figure out which side
Which
I'm on.
word? Right.
Hello everyone. At the bottom of the screen is going to be all of our social media handles. So the social media, the Twitter and the Instagram for 5 More Minutes Mom, as well as the Twitter and the Instagram for the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, which we are under. They are our fabulous producers, our fabulous network, as well as Guerlain and myself are like personal social media handles. If you're interested in following us, it's all going to be down there on that little scrolly bar. So please give us a like, please give us a follow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just, hit up our socials, slide in our DMs and all that good.
Please don't slide in our DMs. Please don't do that. Well, maybe Guerlain, but don't slide in my DMs. Don't do that. I don't need that right now. Okay, so today's episode is going to be a very funny one because we are talking about humor and our sense of humor. We're going to talk about how it's almost like our generation, the millennial generation, has a very distinct sense of humor. And I don't think that's unique. I feel like every generation kind of has a vibe, so to say. Like I feel like Gen Z has a very distinct sense of humor and, that sort of thing. And like you can tell an 80s movie is an 80s movie by the jokes that they've made in that movie. But it's just, it's very interesting, like the type of humor that our generation has.
Right. It's like with you say 80s, I think it's nothing but dad jokes. All of the 80s humor.
Yeah, a
I
little
I
bit.
would say. It's just a lot of hey, like what's your name, or like what time is it? Like, oh, like hi, I'm hungry. Oh, hi hungry. I'm such and such. Like it's that type of.
um,
You like the dad jokes?
I do like dad jokes. I like puns. I like dad jokes. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of 80s humor hasn't aged well. But that's more because of the times that we're in now than those jokes back then. But the thing that I think is so, like, I guess important to us as like millennials and our sense of humor is, I honestly, and I say this with my whole chest and I believe it, I think SpongeBob is the reason that millennials are so fucking weird. Like, I think that's the reason that we're like, that our senses of humor are so dumb the way that they are. Like, the
Mhm.
specific way that, like, we laugh at things and our humor goes. I think it's because of SpongeBob.
Yeah, for a
You
fact.
know,
Yeah.
I just, like, I, because SpongeBob is almost absurdist in a way. I mean, it's not true absurdism. I'm not gonna like get into a whole like art movement kind of spiel, but like there's definitely an absurdism to that type of humor because it is just so ridiculous and so silly. Like they would, like, they'll just like make a weird statement or they'll cut to a weird image, or like that episode, oh wait, the episode of SpongeBob with where SpongeBob gets hurt and he decides that he wants to stay in his house forever, and at the end of the episode there's like a guy in like a gorilla suit, and they're like, how did a gorilla get underwater, and he's just like, bye, and he like rides away
Yeah.
like
Like
that.
so random.
What? And that's the end of the episode.
I
like
I mhm.
oh man, what else? Oh, you know what else is like a really good episode, like a really good, like, I think, like humor thing that I think like like continues on for millennials is the use of sincerity to make something funnier. So like for example, in the episode where SpongeBob gets the seahorse and Squidward's like, SpongeBob, where is my order? And the seahorse ate it. And, SpongeBob's like, oh, did you check under the tray? And he's like, oh, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. And then he like looks under the tray. And then he's like, "No!"
It's like it's that type of humor that and how loud SpongeBob could get.
Yes.
Like just in general. Um like the whole Gary, you're gonna eat your food and you're gonna like it. Like that screaming
Yeah.
type of humor. I feel we really came up on that.
Yeah, and I think also, like, the way that they kind of joked about, like, kind of morbid stuff sometimes, not in, like, an Addams Family way, but, like, in the greatest SpongeBob episode, the greatest SpongeBob episode, Band Geeks, when uh Squilliam is like, "Oh, what happened to your band?" And Squidward's like, "They all died in a marching accident." And that's funny. Like, it's not funny, but it is funny, you know?
Right.
And actually, two of them did die in a marching accident.
The
The one
ones that
spinning
like
the
flew
flags,
into the
they, like,
plane, yeah.
flew into the air and died.
And crashed into a blimp of all
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
yeah, they did. That was but yeah, no, but, like, that episode I think is a really good episode to talk about because it is, like, one of the best episodes I think of SpongeBob, and, like, it pulls in from the absurdism there too, because, like, when Squidward's like, "Oh, does anyone have any questions?" And Patrick is like, "Is mayonnaise an instrument?" And we ate that shit up. We thought that
Yeah.
was the pinnacle of comedy. We thought that was, but it's
Right.
still funny, honestly. It's still funny. Like, I still laugh at SpongeBob. I still watch it all the time. I'm not like, crying with laughter, but I still laugh.
Yeah, a lot of SpongeBob jokes age very well, and I will credit that to the times of not necessarily babying children.
Yeah.
It's that one joke when I'm not sure when this episode aired, but when SpongeBob was trying to get Gary to take a bath,
Hmm.
and so he painted the bathtub as like a treasure chest, and then he took soaps. He took 2 bars of soaps,
Yeah.
like they were
I know
like gold
exactly what
coins.
you're talking about. I
He's like,
literally, in my brain, have
don't
every
drop them.
SpongeBob episode just saved in my brain.
But see, it's like jokes like that. Is as a kid, you're not gonna get it, but you watch as an adult, it's like, oh wow, okay, got it. Don't drop
Yeah,
the
there
soap.
there is definitely adult humor in SpongeBob, but it's not always sexual humor, like the
No.
doubloons don't drop them joke.
Hmm.
Like, sometimes I find myself laughing more at, like, Squidward and his, like, kind of depressing existential, kind of way of being. Because, like, sometimes he would say stuff that as a kid I didn't really get, but as an adult I'm like, "Yeah, I feel that."
Or like I forgot what was the setup for the joke, but when um it was just some random guy just going through the days of his life, like being in the office, being stuck in traffic, and then going home, and it's like, "Are you coming to bed, dear? I'll be there." Like I forgot what was the setup. It was like just
Yes,
saying like he didn't get to live his
yeah,
life or
I do.
something.
I do remember that part. I don't remember what episode that's from, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Or, like, when SpongeBob in one episode is like, "Oh, there's so much in my life I haven't done," and it cuts to him in an office going, "Hold on, I'll transfer your call." Like, I just like, that's what I mean. Like, the humor is just so random. Like, it's so, like, weird and silly, and, like, and I think all of the characters, I think, really come together to help with that, because you have SpongeBob in the middle, he's optimistic, he's kind of happy, he's a little childish, but he has moments of being cynical, he has moments of being, angry, and everyone kind of surrounding him adds to the humor. You have, Patrick, who's, like, very, very dumb. And so a lot of jokes can be made at his expense. You have Squidward, who is like, all the bad things happen to him. So a lot of jokes can be at his expense. You have Sandy, who's, like, super smart and, like, really a daredevil. And so there's a lot of comedic potential. And it's just, it's so interesting because, like, looking back at SpongeBob, it really is. I say maybe I don't wanna say like it was, as if, like, it's not anymore, but it kinda is not anymore. Like, I've seen modern episodes and I'm not
Yeah.
thrilled with them.
Mm.
But like SpongeBob, like I think the SpongeBob before the first movie, because I think that's when the switch happened. So like all the SpongeBob up to the first movie and the first movie, and maybe like one or two episodes after that, like that was peak. That was so good, and it was so funny and so well written, and the characters were all really, really great. And every character had like moments to shine and moments to fail and things like that, you know. I and I loved that because they really knew how to work with the characters. Like, Patrick was dumb until he wasn't, and then it was hilarious. Like, the episode with the secret box,
Mm. Oh yeah.
because like the whole episode, the joke is kind of that Patrick's so dumb that oh, the secret was literally a piece of string. He's so dumb. Like SpongeBob was silly for getting so emotional, and then it turns out that it wasn't a string. He pulled the secret string to open the secret compartment of his secret box, revealing one embarrassing photo of SpongeBob at the Christmas party. Merry Christmas,
Classic.
SpongeBob.
It's just so interesting how
This whole episode is me just quoting SpongeBob. I love it so much.
but that's what our generation does now. All we do is quote SpongeBob and other stuff. And
Yeah.
I just think it's really because okay, like you think back to Bugs Bunny, right?
Mhm.
Um, I guess you could say that was the generation before us. But Bugs was really wise, wisecracking, sly, a lot of heavy references of what's going on in the world. That was Bugs. Like
Yeah.
he would reference something about the Vietnam War or reference something about a celebrity that some controversy that just recently happened. They'll slide that into the cartoon.
Yeah.
And people will see that, they'll laugh, yada yada. Oh,
Yeah.
it's what was the word? It's topical, right?
Um,
That's the phrase.
yeah, I mean he definitely made references to things that the people watching would know. Like he would make like a Carmen Miranda joke
Right.
because that generation knew who Carmen Miranda was. Even though she wasn't like super super relevant, they knew who she was, and that would be like an appropriate person to like make a reference to.
Right. So I think it's interesting how it shifts from Bugs and Looney Tunes to what SpongeBob did, and what SpongeBob did was they didn't really pull a lot of references. It was just real life, but for undersea creatures. And how now our generation, we're technically Bugs Bunny because all we do is do the references and a wisecracking, putting things in situational, like if it makes sense. Like that, there's a TikTok of a woman and her friend. They're in the bathroom. I guess they're a little tipsy, and they knocked over her drink into the sink, and she goes, "Oh no, my drink!" And then it clicked in her head, and she was like, "My drink, my diet Dr. Kelp." You know, it's like now
Yeah, yeah.
we turn into Bugs Bunny, but we're quoting SpongeBob. I just think that
Right.
little is kind of interesting thinking about that.
That is really interesting. It's a little sad because that means that our sense of humor stopped when we were like 12. Like that's all. But I think it is really funny because like everybody watched SpongeBob. Everybody watched SpongeBob. So I think in a way it was almost an easy way for us to like make friends with people.
Mm,
Like I remember this is a little bit later, but it was high school. And I was new in the high school and like, making friends and everything. And someone quoted SpongeBob and they did the whole like rev up those fryers, and my leg.
right.
And all of us lost it. Like we all started laughing. It was very funny, even though literally he just quoted that scene. Like he didn't make an original joke. He just quoted that. And then we were all friends after that.
Mm,
And we would just quote, you know, SpongeBob to each other. And that's kind of how we became friends. And I feel like that's such an easy way to like make somebody laugh around our age. Like
yeah.
if you just go up to someone and you're like, "Hey, Smitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen, he was number one." You'll get a laugh. You'll get like a yeah. That episode is also very funny. Like that
Yeah.
episode when when Mr. Krabs is like, "Oh, I have all these other hats to trade," and he's like, "Here, Foxy Grandpa." He's like, "I thought the Foxy Grandpa would get him," you know?
Right.
I did, yeah. It's just SpongeBob is so silly. It's so silly in like a really wholesome way. You know, like it's so
Mm.
silly and funny and irreverent, and I think it was so different from any other type of like humor that we had, because before SpongeBob, I feel like the type of humor we had was very like kind of down to earth. Like, just the humor from like everyday situations, and or it was very mean spirited,
Mm.
or very, or a little bit gross out, like I'm kind of thinking of like Ren and Stimpy, and I never liked Ren and Stimpy. I'll admit it. I never liked Ren and Stimpy.
Mm.
I thought the humor was either really mean or kind of gross. Like I didn't like it.
It, it was a lot.
Yeah, and so I think, and then SpongeBob came, and I think SpongeBob really shaped humor, because I feel like so many other shows have that kind of humor now, where it's silly, where it's irreverent, where characters will just say weird out of pocket shit, and it works and it's really funny. And I think, like, for example, like one of my favorite cartoon characters is like Mabel Pines from Gravity Falls, and she's just
Mm.
a weirdo. She's just crazy. And I love her, but I don't think she would exist without SpongeBob.
Agreed. Yeah.
Kind of like paving the way for that kind of character to be really silly. Because obviously people like that exist, but like I think SpongeBob really kind of paved the way for those type of characters and that kind of humor to exist. Most of it is like pretty low key, like silly situations that anybody could get into. But then like the weirdest stuff will happen and you just go along with it.
Yeah. Like another show that pretty much followed in the footsteps of SpongeBob is Chowder. Something that came
Mm,
a little bit. Um, Chowder premiered, I want to say 2008, roughly
yeah.
2009. Si- Not the same exact to a T. Like there were, it did rely a little bit on gross out humor, just a tad. But the randomness, the silliness, the did a lot of fourth wall breaks. But
Yes.
the that loud, screamy, in your face type of humor that SpongeBob introduced. Not that SpongeBob was all about that, but that part, it really, I say, is heavily influenced by SpongeBob.
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting, when you really think about that, you know, and eh, it's crazy when you think about like the first episode of SpongeBob, which is when he gets his job at Krusty Krab,
Mm.
um, and it's very tense because all of the anchovies are like in the building and they're breaking it apart and they want food, and here comes SpongeBob, and like he's ready to go and it's super serious, and then it like breaks out into like a silly song and he's just like making patties and everything. Like I think like that I think changed something in my brain, like that unlocked something
Mm.
for me, and I think that moment was like, yeah, yeah. That moment was like, "This is SpongeBob. This is what it's gonna be," and it was, and it was great.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
I just love SpongeBob's ability to like carry a joke, and like for example, what oh shoot, what was that? Like it was it's the episode where Squidward hasn't tried a Krabby Patty,
Mm.
and he's like, and it's sort of like, "No, Squidward, you can't eat all that many." And he's like, "Oh, what? Am I gonna blow up?" And he's like, "No, it'll go straight to your thighs, and then you'll blow up." Like, it's just like that. I think it's like it's really like good comedic timing. The irreverent like punchline. I think all of those things really made SpongeBob, I think, the great comedy that it is,
Mhm.
and the reason that we can still quote it today, because it like stuck in our brain like glue, you know.
And now, well, all of us is just doing SpongeBob quotes, approaching situations. kind like every time there's a moment that we could capture where we could quote something from SpongeBob, we're like
Yep.
we hold on to that, we take it. It was like, and then we get upset too for those who like don't get the reference. It was like, damn, it's like, how old are you?
Yeah.
Fuck, I'm old. What the fuck?
Yeah. I also think something that's really cool about SpongeBob is like its memeability. Like I feel like so many memes are like SpongeBob memes.
Oh yeah,
Like the I'ma head out, that one is SpongeBob, the like confused Mr. Krabs. Um like there's a few more obviously. Like SpongeBob is just very memeable, I think because a lot of the screenshots are just like very funny in their own way. Um it really like oh man, I love SpongeBob so much. And when you think about it, like SpongeBob has really become, I think, the face of Nickelodeon, and
yeah,
and he was, I feel like, their biggest moneymaker for so long,
yeah.
and
For a fact.
for good reason. And it's just crazy to think about, like, this guy was like a marine biologist, and he's like, you know what I want to do? I want to make a show about an undersea sponge, and it's going to be silly and weird and kind of stupid but like good. And then it became SpongeBob SquarePants. Like it just became like, you know and apparently it was supposed to be like, canceled after the first movie, and it's just continued on, which whether that's good or bad, I'm not going to say. I'm not going to make a judgment just because I haven't watched the newer episodes of SpongeBob.
Mm.
um but like the ability that it had to just stay and continue and just stay in our minds and stay in our hearts and like be this kind of connecting force for us, because I feel like I could go up to anybody from our like age group across any country, because SpongeBob was in like so many different countries, any country, any kind of background, and I could, you know, be like, "Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?" And they would know, and they
They
would
get it right.
know, and they would laugh, and I think that's wonderful.
Did you know in France, SpongeBob is called Bob Le Bouche? It sounds so fancy, doesn't it? Like, let's say I'm watching Bob Le Bouche. Have you
Bob
ever
Le
heard of
Bouche.
Bob Le Bouche?
Um,
But rest in peace to Stefan Hillenberger, man. Hillenberg.
yeah,
Like I really hope that before he passed, that he was aware of the impact that he had on a generation through his creation. Um,
I think he did, and I hope he did too, because
yeah,
he really should. He really should be proud, and I hope he did feel proud of what he did, because like, was SpongeBob out here teaching us our ABCs? No. Was he, really, making a difference in the world? No.
I mean,
But
I'll
what
say
he
SpongeBob did teach me how to tie my shoes.
Okay, see, okay, SpongeBob taught you how to tie your shoes.
Mm,
Um, but I think the impact of SpongeBob, I think, is ultimately a net good. I think if at the end of the day, when everything's tallied up, I think SpongeBob will be a positive. If for nothing else, because it just made a bunch of kids laugh,
yeah,
because it made a bunch of kids remember to be silly and remember to be happy, and you know to find joy in the little things. And you know I yeah, I just, oh man, I could just I could watch SpongeBob all day every day, and I often do. It's like a comfort show for me. Because I know, because with a lot of shows, and this is not to say it's a bad thing. Like every show is going to have episodes that you don't like, that you want to skip over, that don't age well. Like every show is like that, except SpongeBob. And
mm,
I think it's because SpongeBob is like its own separate thing. Like you were saying with Bugs Bunny, like they made references to outside stuff. SpongeBob never really did that.
yeah,
SpongeBob was its own kind of contained universe. And yeah, there were like maybe little jokes that you could kind of, be like, "Oh yeah, like, like my diet Dr. Kelp," like could be a reference to like Dr. Pepper or something.
yeah,
But ultimately it was its own little bubble, and I think that's why it's managed to persist the way that it has, because it
definitely,
you don't ever have to worry about it going stale. Like the jokes will always be funny,
yeah.
you know.
Um, and not to do a hard pivot, but I think when we're speaking on the whole generation thing, I would say that SpongeBob is one end of a spectrum. And on the opposite end, I would say it shows like Ed, Edd and Eddie for some people.
Okay.
Um, and I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I would also argue that Ed, Edd and Eddie also had a large, if not a decent sized impact on this generation in terms of sound effects, using sound effects as a humor. Because
Yeah.
the sound game, the sound design on Ed, Edd and Eddie is it's next level stuff.
Oh,
And
okay.
the way they utilized it, like say if a character is running, instead of the normal, you hearing the footsteps, you hearing the dirt, you hear instead of hearing that, you hear like a car engine going as the person's running. It's just the way they play with sound design. If someone was about to
Yeah.
get slapped, instead of hearing like a slap sound, you hear the slap sound, but before you might hear a sumo wrestler like going pow, and I see that a lot with a lot of YouTubers. They would use like sound effects like that to emphasize a joke or emphasize something that they're doing within their
Yeah.
content. And I'm like, that's Edda and Eddie, like all the way.
Yeah, that's you know what? You'll have to forgive me. I'm not super familiar with Ed, Edd and Eddy.
Mm,
I watched it and I definitely did find certain episodes funny, but ultimately I wasn't a huge fan of it.
mm.
It was a little too like slapsticky for me. I've never
Oh
really
yeah,
been into slapstick. Like
yeah,
my dad loves like Three Stooges, but I was never into that. And Ed and Eddy is kind of like a version of that.
basically, yeah.
Which in its own way I think is really good that, here's a show introducing kids to the idea of slapstick. Like, great, awesome. Um, but you're right. That whole like type of YouTuber that's like very loud and in your face and like uses like the funny, sound effects and everything. Yeah, that you can make that direct correlation, you know? Yeah, that's so
hmm
interesting.
Yeah, it's just it's tiny things that we pick up that we don't realize. And then when you really get into it, we're like, yeah, that show did influence me with this and influence me with that. And this is the reason why I like this type of humor, is because
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. That yeah, it just that sort of like screamy kind of in your face, weird sound effects, weird moments and asides. Like, yeah, that whole YouTube, I think, idea. Yeah. Oh wow, that's so cool. I didn't even think about that.
I mean, that was all of Vine, if you want to think about
Yes.
it. You remember
That was all of
Vine?
Vine, yeah. Vine is but yeah, Vine is hilarious, honestly,
Mm,
like, I still watch, like, Vine compilation because I think Vine is actually really interesting because I think it's, like, those 2 things combined. Like,
yeah.
it's the loud, weird sound effects in your face of Ed, and Eddy mixed with the irreverency and the weird punchline of SpongeBob, like, together, you know?
hmm
And I think that's why Vine forever be in our hearts, you know?
Yeah. And what I feel a lot of people neglect to mention about SpongeBob is their snappy comebacks.
Yes.
Like when SpongeBob was on his roof, he was saying, "I'm ugly and I'm proud. I'm ugly and I'm proud." Squidward on his roof, is that what he calls it? Like it was so. and
Yeah.
and I see a lot
Yeah,
of that today.
the dialogue was pretty fast paced.
hmm
Like, in the episode where they adopt the little scallop and, uh, and 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 that episode is so great, but, like,
hmm
Patrick's like, "Oh, can I be the mom?" And SpongeBob's like, "I don't think you can be the mom, Patrick, because you never wear a shirt." "You're right. If I was a mom, this would be kinda shocking." Like, there's, like oh, man, and "Gee, Patrick, what do you do when I'm at school? Wait for you to get back?" Like, it's just yeah, I think that's also, like yeah, that's part of it too, just, that it's real SpongeBob had really good dialogue.
hmm
Yeah, SpongeBob had really, really good dialogue. Like that is something that I always kind of, you know, that I think is also part of that because I think, yeah, I just love SpongeBob so much.
Yeah, great. It's great.
Yeah, and it really is so interesting because I think the reason that I can still watch SpongeBob today, I think says something about its quality
Mm,
and says something about how genuine it is as a show, and I think that's so important because, you know, you would think you could make the assumption that, like, because the jokes are kinda stupid sometimes and, because the episodes are really silly and they don't have much of a plot and, sometimes they go off track, that the show itself is kind of whatever, like, you can brush it off, but I
right.
think you can tell, and this is my opinion, but I feel like you can tell when you watch SpongeBob that everyone there was having a good time.
Yeah.
Everyone there making that show wanted to make it, wanted to make it good, and was enjoying the time that they spent making it. And I think that's why millennials latched onto it the way that we did.
Yeah,
You
for a
know?
fact. Hmm.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say about SpongeBob? Should we quote another episode?
I was trying to think of a closer. I can't think of one. It's
We
just a great show.
oh, we should have talked about this before we started shooting, because we should have done? We should have been like, "Okay, well, now on to our next point," and then it just cuts off to black, like in the Krusty Krab training video.
Oh yeah.
Our
Oh,
next topic is
that always just real quick, that always irked me. I always thought for the longest time, I thought there was something wrong with our TV.
Yep,
Because it was like the secret formula is is and it would just cut. I'm like, what happened to the TV? And every single time that episode aired, that would happen. I'm like, Mom, Dad, we need to get a new TV because I don't I don't know the secret patty formula.
yeah.
Oh, that always got me tight.
You know what's crazy though? I wonder if you could, like I wonder if they were influenced by The Sopranos
Mm,
to do that, because that's what happened during the season finale of the series finale of The Sopranos. It was like they were coming into a restaurant and then it just cut to black and
yeah,
everyone was like, "What?"
what
Like my
happened?
dad who watched The Sopranos was like, "What, is something wrong with my television?" But no, that was the end. So I'm wondering if Stephen Hillenberg was like, "Hmm."
Well, screw The Sopranos if that is the case, because
Yeah.
it had me tripping.
Yeah. I just yeah. Yeah. I I'm very eloquent today, but SpongeBob is so important to me, and I watch it all the time whenever I'm in kind of a bad or yucky mood because it always makes me laugh and it always makes me smile, and I'm so happy that it's still relevant, I think, to so many people, you know?
Yeah. So many quotes, so many, "Oh, brother, this guy stinks!" Like, you see it everywhere. SpongeBob is literally everywhere, and you know what? It's great. You can't say nothing bad about it.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's global, and I think that it deserves to be, you know?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so I think we're done. Um, at the bottom of the screen, we're going to put that little roller that has all of our social media if you're interested in following. We post new videos every Saturday at 11 a.m. on youtube.com/ETB. So try and catch us and check us out. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell us, how you connected with SpongeBob. Tell us your favorite SpongeBob quote, and we'll try and guess the episode. Yeah, do that. Put your
That'll
favorite
be fun.
SpongeBob quote in a comment, and we'll guess the episode. And if we get it right, you owe us $1 million. But that is a completely different movie. Although there is actually that was me quoting the Smitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen episode because the guy's offering. Uh,
$1 million, yeah.
and then he's
Son.
on the boat, like the spin. All
Uh,
right, okay. All right. So goodbye, everybody.
next time. Peace.
Bye.